And what is not good for walnuts is actually good for grapes. So having smaller trees and smaller vegetative growth translates a lot to intensity of fruit and good quality wine. So we were 30 years old and we took a winger, and here we are.
Welcome to the Swirl Suite, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. On this episode, we talk with co-founder of Obsidian Wine, Peter Molnar. Peter began his adventures in wine as a teenager, suckering and tying vines and driving irrigation factors during summers in the vineyard where his father grew grapes for Napa Valley wineries. Listen to his full, amazing story right here on the Swirl Suite. Cheers.
It's so cool that it's actually snowing up here. So, can you see the snowflakes?
Actually, I did just see a couple.
Yeah, it's snowing up here.
You see a couple against his jacket. You can see it. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
it's like 38 degrees here, so I may have to put on my cap somewhere.
Oh, I see the snowflakes now.
Yeah, and you might need some gloves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
38. I thought we left
cold
temperatures behind.
Yeah, well, we get these cold shots from coming down from the north this time of year. It's almost 3,000 feet in elevation, so it can get pretty cold here. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Yes. Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So where are you?
So I'm at the top of Obsidian Ridge. We are the highest vineyard in the Mayacamas Mountains. The Mayacamas separates Napa and Sonoma valleys. This is an abandoned walnut orchard that we found 22 years ago. Planted it 20 years ago, and we make our Obsidian Ridge wines from here. So that's where I am right now. And we're just up here doing winter work, and I thought I'd come up and speak with you all while I'm up here in the vineyard.
How do you
I didn't expect it to snow. How do we find the vineyard?
How do you find an abandoned vineyard and just start producing such great fruit to make this marvelous wine?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I'd love to say that we had a grand strategy, but a lot of life is just serendipity and luck. Our parents found an old dairy cattle farm in Napa Carneros 45 years ago. And it was when my brother and my turn, I guess we just had the same kind of feeling like, but the story of West Coast winemaking isn't finished. It's still being written. So what happens when you go north and along the Mayacamas Mountains? So the Mayacamas Mountains, which is it means in Native American, the home of the mountain lion, or also the cry of the mountain lion. There's two different ways of saying it. But the Mayacamas has produced this amazing mountain Cabernet, Mount Veeder, Spring Mountain, Diamond Mountain. Howell Mountain is not the Mayacamas, but it's right across. And we thought, it'd be so cool to find something that's a little bit further up the ridge. And so we started poking around in the late 90s. And we found this beautiful abandoned walnut orchard. I mean, behind me, it was 350 acres of walnuts. And there were these bonsai walnut trees. They were probably only 6 to 10 feet tall. They were dry farmed on this ridiculously rocky soil. And what is not good for walnuts is actually good for grapes. So having smaller trees and smaller vegetative growth translates a lot to intensity of fruit and good quality wine. So we were 30 years old and we took a winger, and here we are.
Wow.
So
I mean, look at that view behind you. That's so picturesque.
So right behind me. So this is Mount Canakdai behind me there. It is 4,600 feet. And then behind is Clear Lake, which is the oldest geological lake in North America. It's 2 million years old. And this was once one of the most, it is the youngest volcanic flow in Northern California. In fact, this soil that we're on here, this was still exploding 10,000 years ago rather. Native American populations moved into this basin 14,000 years ago. So it was still exploding. And right behind me, on the other side, we have a 5-acre surveyed Native American archaeological site. And this is where they made tools out of this very sharp obsidian. It's not even a rock, it's silica, it's glass.
Wow.
So it's a spectacular spot area, part of California.
Do you have, hi Peter, I'm Leslie. Do you have any, do you have issues with irrigation? Do you have to Did you have to put in an irrigation system, or is it natural irrigation there?
No, we did. Because the soils are so rocky, the water holding potential is very low. But that means we do have to water, like many of the vineyards in California, right? We have no rain here really between May and November. And so as it happens, we have a fractured volcanic zone below us, and it's not like a reservoir underneath us. It's basically like, think about it like an ossified sponge, and all the water hits the vineyard and this ridge around me and settles into that. Our hydrologist tells us we may be using water that's 600 years old. That's how long it takes to kind of percolate down there. But it's sustainable in that on a typical year, this vineyard will get about 120 million gallons of water, and we will use about 20 million gallons, but we will re-drip it back into the soil. So most of it goes through our system and down into the soil. Another interesting thing about that is that our power comes from the geothermal field that's right behind us. It's the largest active working geothermal field in the world. It produces enough power to power 2 San Franciscos. So all of our power is sustainably generated by those geothermal vents, which is much of the same activity that created this obsidian in the first place. We're on top of what's called the North Coast Magma Pocket. It's one of the thinnest parts of the Earth's crust in North America. And we have a flume of magma right underneath where I'm standing that's kind of heating those geysers and created the volcanic activity that created all this obsidian. So if you're a geologist, geologists love Lake County. Winemakers too, but geologists first and foremost.
So what is the climate like? How would you describe the climate since it's snowing right now, which is a little surprise to me, but please tell us about the climate.
Yeah, so we're in a mountain climate zone here, which is quite different. So much of grapes love cool nights. Let me just start with that. Essentially, every time a grape is below 50 degrees temperature, like your fridge at home, it stops metabolizing. And above that temperature, it starts ripening when it's not snowing, when we actually have a growing season. But what that means is that most really great wine regions are cool at night, either because they're close to the ocean, like you would imagine Sonoma Coast, higher in latitude, like Burgundy, or higher in elevation, like where we are in the high Mayacamas, or perhaps the Andes is a good example, like Mendoza. And each of those climatic factors allows the nighttime temperatures to drop, especially during the last part of harvesting, where a lot of the exciting parts of ripening happen, or the really good parts of ripening happen. So we're in a mountain climate here, which means I'm almost at 3,000 feet of elevation. So a couple different things. One is that we have a lot less humidity, and therefore the air does not hold heat so much. So if you live in a warmer climate where it's more humid, you can eat outside at night because it stays, warm until midnight. Like here, when the sun goes down behind the ridge, it gets chilly right away. Like if you go camping anytime we're at 4,000 feet. The second thing is that every 1,000 feet you go up, you have 3% more ultraviolet light. And so at 3,000 feet, we almost have 10% ultraviolet light here. And that's what we call luminosity. And that really helps with ripening of fruit. It creates thicker skins. And as you guys know, that in the inside of the grape is just sugar, water, and acid, but all the flavor and the color are from the skin itself. And the skin reacts to more ultraviolet light by getting thicker. It basically builds a sunscreen around its next generation, which are the seeds. So those are the big factors of mountain viticulture generally.
So Peter, let's back up. Tell us about tell us about your initial connection to wine.
Yeah, so this is a story about how much California winemaking has changed. I don't know if anybody remembers the Pepe Brothers winery, but the Pepe Brothers, it's owned by Kendall Jackson. It's a beautiful little, now it's called, I'll come to you in a second, but it's right across from Mustard's on Highway 29. My parents came from Europe in 1956. They left Hungary during the revolution because of communism after the war, and they settled in San Francisco. And my dad's first job was he helped put together like pension plans, employee pension plans, as his first job out of college. And the Pepe brothers were one of his clients. Now, the Pepe brothers, who became quite well known for winemaking, at the time were an Italian family, and their business was taxidermy. They were stuffing animals down by the San Francisco airport. They had 30 employees. And my dad was their advisor on there. And one Sunday, they invited them up for a big Italian dinner at the Pepe Brothers Winery, which is a relatively small little winery at the time. And they just said something random like, Nicholas, the future, my dad's name is Nicholas, the future of Napa Valley is grapes. Now you have to remember at that time, there were more prunes and plums and cattle than there were grapes in Napa in the early 60s. But he got the idea in his head, and he and his friends got together, put some money together, started planting vineyards in the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s. And I ended up working on those vineyards in high school. And I think when my dad had us, my first summer was in a tent, an old Army surplus green tent. But I think they really wanted us to recognize the value of an education. They wanted us to recognize the value of hard physical labor and what everybody did out in the vineyard and understand that. But I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I really enjoyed it. I got to drive a tractor, irrigate vines, tie vines, just do the basic work that happens in the vineyard. So that was the beginning for me.
Wow. So do you have other siblings, and are they?
I do.
Well,
yes. I have an older sister who's an environmental engineer. My brother, he and I are partners with our other partners in the making wine.
Made it a family business. Good.
Oh, yeah.
Did you think at 16 you would come back and be in the family business?
It's funny. I don't think I gave it a thought. I didn't know. I wasn't against it, but I didn't imagine. I wasn't very specific about imagining. Let me put it that way. What really got it for me was when I had the chance to move back to Hungary after the wall came down in 1990. I left college in 1990 and went back to Budapest and fell into a job where I was working, helping privatize the Hungarian wine industry. And that was very interesting. And it took in a lot of the things I'd studied in college. But the most amazing thing was watching this whole really ancient wine tradition reinvent itself after communism and being part of that. And just the adventure and generosity of all those winemakers I had a chance to meet with, their wines to taste, and they were getting better every year. That's what really hooked me. So when I came back here in the mid-90s after 4 or 5 years in Europe, I knew that wine was going to be my work.
And so what do you mean by privatize Hungarian wine? What does that entail?
Sure. So, everything after the Soviets took over Central Europe after the war, they pushed all the Germans out. They won, but then they stayed. So what we think of as the Soviet Empire was really that they never went home. Poland and Czech Republic and Hungary and Slovakia and so forth. But that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
But so when I arrived, the wall had just come down, and this was August of 1990. And so all these governments and these countries had to figure out, how do you rebuild after communism? Like, it's never been done in the history of the world, where 100% of the economy was run by the government, by the state. Mm-hmm. And so they had to privatize it. And so it was a very complex and not always very well thought out program. I wouldn't say it wasn't thought out, but it was kind of on the fly a little bit, of how do you figure out how to give land and factories and houses and apartment buildings back to people. So that's the work I was involved with. And it depended on the size of the different kinds of companies, but sometimes the companies would just be given to the employees. I was involved with some of those. Some of the big companies were bought by foreign investors because they wanted to bring in money and investment. So that was the work I was doing.
So let's talk about Obsidian really quick. Tell us about the Outdoor Adventure Series. All of you guys who are involved with Obsidian are outdoorsmen, and you do a lot of activities outside. So tell us about that.
Well, I'm standing outside. We grow grapes outside. We have a feeling like it's probably appropriate to drink wine outside. So that's really kind of the logic, meaning so the adventure series, you could almost call it exploration series as much. So what we do is we have the big volcano. We have a geologist, so we do a hike a volcano series where the geologist will go through how this area was created and all the geology that went into it. We'll drink the wines and we'll just give people context about where something comes from. So, for example, down in our Poseidon vineyard, that's on the very edge of San Pablo Bay and San Francisco Bay, we'll talk about the wetlands and the influence of the ocean and fog on our wines. We're doing a lot of work right now with Hog Island. They talk about how oysters pick up different flavors from where they are. So look, it's about having fun. We should have fun when we're drinking wine, but we're really trying to bring it outside. I mean, look, there's a lot to say about going into a nice tasting room and it's all set up beautifully and you have your one glass after another. But I guess the difference is maybe if I were to use art, I just thought of this a second ago. It's you either see it in a museum wall or you get to go to the artist studio and see how they build it. So I think in a way we're trying to get people to come to the studio and say, this is why we think this wine tastes like this because of the elevation of these rocks or whatever it is. I think it just makes it more, ideally, we want people to feel as connected to it as we are in a way.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
And girls, really quick, I actually put the link for all of the adventures in the email that I sent. Scan those really quick and just.
Oh, girl, I looked.
Yeah. Well, yes. So tell us which one you would select if you were to choose one.
It was one on a boat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The schooner that we do.
The sail on the bay.
That's the one.
It's a beautiful boat, and it's stable and great. You can taste wine without the glass falling out of your hand. the bay can get pretty rough.
Are you a captain? I noticed in your background that you had a sailing background. Are you steering the ship?
Not on that boat, but I am a licensed captain as it happens. I grew up on the water around the Bay Area and I love it very much. So it's part of the work other work I do. I'm involved with a couple of ocean research projects as it happens on the off season.
Now this backyard one, does that mean you bring everything to someone's backyard? You create an experience in their backyard?
Yeah. So that was frankly a response to COVID.
That's still awesome.
So it's basically a pop-up that shows up at your house. So we bring the wines, we bring the stemware, we bring the food, we bring a accompanying food. You invite all the friends that you want. You're as distant or not distant as you care to be. And then we do an outdoor tasting for you in your backyard.
Oh, wow. That's
super fun.
I think I want to explore the forest of Tokai.
Oh, yeah.
That was a tight second.
Yeah.
Second, girl.
My God, I love Tokai.
But I saw the boat and was like, we on a boat. Like, that's all I can think about.
And this
Tokai is a special place.
And there's a Saffron Harvest.
Oh, yeah. I was just looking at that.
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
So
that's a couple who came up here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was talking out loud, thinking of saffron and food and wine. Go ahead, sweetheart. I don't want to interrupt.
Sorry. So that's a couple who came up here to Lake County, I think 5 years ago, and started planting saffron. I think they're a type of bush. I don't know. And they are now harvesting saffron once a year. It's called Peace and Plenty Farms. They're just down the road from here, down by the lake. And what's kind of a fun part about being up here, there's a really old and still vibrant agriculture tradition up here. There's pears, walnuts. People are raising cattle, sheep, goats, etc. as well. So it's not just grapes.
Wow. And what is down the rabbit hole?
Right.
Down the rabbit hole. So, everything we've done has been a little bit down the rabbit hole is the way we think about it. Like when our parents found the Carneros property and it was the first property to be planted in Southern Carneros, or when we found Obsidian Ridge, or when we started working with Hungarian Oak, we've always just enjoyed exploring and finding these different traditions, like a lot of them are traditions, wine traditions that have been around for a long time, like Oak and Tokai. I mean, the village where we have our wood mill has a 1,000-year written tradition of coopering. It's one of the oldest cooperage traditions, barrel making traditions in Europe.
Oh, I definitely.
So the rabbit hole part is just to continue that spirit. So we made Pet Nat. We call it Pezsgő, the Hungarian name, which is a rosé, Pétillant Naturel. We made Piquette, which is we call it Mashklash, out of Chardonnay skins. We did a Pear Blanc this year, which is a combination of Sauvignon Blanc and pear wines. Lake County pears are famous. So those are fun wines. You know, it's funny. I joke, for example, Pet Nat, which is getting kind of a reputation now. It's basically farmers' champagne. You know, they wanted to make something to drink out of every part of the grape, and reuse. Piquette is the reusing of the white wine grape skins after fermentation. You put water on it, you add a little sugar, you use it again. Our friend of ours said the Piquette tastes like if kombucha and wine had a baby.
Yeah, it does.
It would be like.
That's accurate.
So our idea is just to celebrate those traditions that people have been making wines in different types for a long time, because they basically wanted to have enough to drink till the next harvest, let's be frank, to make it through the winters, particularly Europe, cold. But, you know, it's just, for us, it's our way of just holding on to the fun part and exploratory part of winemaking.
Nice.
Leslie, did you choose your adventure?
Can't decide.
Leslie gonna name 5 of them. Like,
I know I can't. I want it all, but I really like that the seaplane wine flight and the oyster harvest. Like, if we could start with the flight and then at sunset do the oyster harvest, would be lovely.
Are you trying to double up? All right.
Yeah.
Part of the
I'm trying to
rules,
get a
but
2
all
for
right.
1. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, luckily you don't have to choose.
Right. Because we're just dreaming. We're all playing make believe. So you know.
Until the world opens back up, I have to do one of these.
Exactly.
Have you had people camp out at the vineyard, like do a glamping experience?
Yeah, so that's something that we're working on. There's a lot of room up here to do it. It's really beautiful, and we have native forest all around us, so we can do that. We haven't gotten to that stage, but working on that. Yes.
Nice. Hey, Tanisha, the Explore Tokai you arrive in Budapest, and then via boat on the Danube River, you get to the forest. So that's a 2 for.
Oh, okay. I didn't see the boat part of that. Okay, I didn't see the boat part of that. Now that's doable.
Yeah, it's a multidisciplinary adventure.
Yeah, that's doable. Because I'm like, when am I going to be in California again? That's like light years away.
I'll have to meet you in Paris and go to it.
Yes, we'll go to Hungary and taste everything.
Exactly.
So, Peter, can you tell us about the wine that we're drinking? We have the estate-grown Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes. So you're drinking the 2017, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a true mountain Cabernet in every sense of the word, from where it's grown and also, I believe, what it tastes like. So we planted, when we had the opportunity to find this place, even though it was unexplored, we contacted some of the best older hands in the business who've been working on the vineyards up on the mountains, the lower Mayacamas. And so we asked them what kind of varietals should we plant and what kind of spacing and all that sort of thing. So what we wanted to do is put on the table a really true mountain Cabernet. And I hope we've done it. There are 6 different clones of Cabernet in it. And there's some Petit Verdot, some Petit Syrah, and some Malbec in it as well. And in different proportions, different years. I can't remember exactly the 2017 right offhand. But the idea is to really capture not just the vineyard itself, but everything around it. So really good. One of the nice things about the mountains is you're near the forest, and grapes are super sensitive to the compounds of plants around them. In Australia, if they're near eucalyptus, you get that minty character, but here you get this sort of chaparral character. So there's a kind of an herbal note to it without being green, which kind of offsets the sort of intense fruit that you get from mountain cab. There's plenty of tannin. There's lots of structure. But another interesting thing about this wine is because of the different elevation profiles of the vineyard. It starts at 2,300 feet. It ends at 2,700 feet almost. The top of the vineyard gets ripe first. The bottom vineyard ripens about a month later because of the way the temperature inversion is. The top of the vineyard gives us lots of sort of black fruit and ripeness and volume. The middle of the vineyard tends to give us some structure, and the bottom of the vineyard, we pick at lower alcohol levels or sugar levels, tends to be more aromatic. It's almost like picking 3 different vineyards at a time, 3 different vineyards as opposed to just one. So it's Cabernet, it's classic Cabernet, it should taste like Cabernet, but it tends to be a little bit more focused and not as sweet or rich as some Cabernets can be. And that's just what mountain fruit gives you. And that's what we love it about it.
It is really tasty.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I am
Glad you like it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
I'm a cab girl anyway.
Did you say that do you age it in Hungarian oak? I don't know.
We do.
Earlier. Okay.
So one of the random rabbit hole adventures we fell into in Hungary was finding a cooperage. It was in the midst of privatization, as I talked about earlier. Spontaneous privatization was the code word for it. Basically, just gave the company to the people who worked there and said, "Good luck." They didn't give any money, they didn't give any backing. They just said, "Do your best." And so, as it happened, we were introduced to this cooperage. At that time, there were about 22 people there. They were actually making planter boxes for a Home Depot type company in Austria to make men's meat. We worked with them, and now we're back up to 66 people, and we are distributed all around the world. So it's been kind of a good story. But one of the things is that we found out that was unique about it was all of the oak came from the Tokaj region. And what makes that really interesting is that Tokaj and the mountains around Tokaj are one of the youngest volcanic flows in Europe. And they're also quite cool. So they create very tight-grained trees that are quite dense. And they are all of Quercus petrea. They're one of the 2 species in Europe, but there are only 2 forests in Europe that have 100% Quercus petrea, Trancé in France, which is very highly respected, and Tokaj. All that being said, it basically is a very aromatic wood. It tends to be more aromatic and less structural. So it tends to give less tannin in the wine. Sometimes the barrels are used very much, sometimes we call it frame up wine, give it structure. This wine doesn't need structure. It has plenty of fruit structure itself, but we really love to accentuate the aromatics because that's, let's face it, we're all biologically attuned to good fruit and sweetness. That's really what we like. And so this oak is particularly well suited to mountain fruit because it tends to heighten the fruit character of it and really bring up those high tones. And what's interesting about Cabernet, Cabernet is such a great grape, but so often misunderstood. Here's why I say that. We think of Cabernet as just being powerful, and it is. It's great with steak, or it's a substantial wine. But really great Cabernets are also very pretty. And by that, I mean that the high tones of like lavender and rose and those kinds of, even orange peel, all those things, if they are part of that whole structure, that makes Cabernet really exciting. And that's what you get when you have slightly cool finishes to harvest, because some of those high tones remain. If you are in a warm area, and let's face it, Napa is in a warm area. We're the same latitude as Morocco. The only thing that keeps us from being like the climate of Morocco is the very cold Alaska current that comes along our coastline. And Napa makes delicious Cabernets. We all love them, but we've all had Cabernets that are just a little too sweet, a little too heavy. That's what happens when you lose those high tones. It's almost like the high tones are a yin and yang thing in good fruit. So ideally, our oak use, going back to the question about oak, the reason we use this kind of oak is to maintain those high tones in fruit in the wine.
I've never heard anyone, and please don't take this the wrong way, describe Cab as sweet, but I understand what you're saying. yeah, I definitely, that is an interesting way of describing it. And I never looked at it that way before.
So it's not necessarily residual sugar sweet.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying that at all.
No. But the effect, we talk about this all the time. But if you add on the fact that, so alcohol is sweet in of itself, right? The ripe fruit is sweet in itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes barrels can give sweetness. Barrels have a lot of vanilla in them, especially French oak barrels. So you start adding those three things up, then it gets, then you kind of tip the balance. Like vanilla ice cream is good, right? And then you put hot fudge on it, good. And then you put caramel on it, it's like not so good. It's like at some point you need to be careful there. And so our point is that, we like that ripe fruit. We all do. But that's the kind of balance.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just think that's a very interesting way of describing it, because most people approach, when you're talking about a cab, as its bigness, its boldness, its tannic, but they don't really describe the fruit of the wine. It's more focused on the savory and the soil notes that attribute to a cab.
Yeah, and look, luckily there's no right answer. I mean, they can all be they can all be tasty in their way. But for example, our partner Cooperage is in Cognac, and they Taranto, that we work with in their Hungarian project, but they supply a lot of very good chateaus in France. And I can't say that I know those wines very well, but I have had a chance to taste them. They really have this beautiful, beautiful lavender note that is big on Bordeaux, and that's a fruit note. Yes, and I agree with you that the structure and the bigness and the soil notes are important as well. But it's, ultimately it is we are tasting it from fruit.
Yeah. I love when a big wine doesn't come across and slap me in the face. Like, this is a big bodied wine, and the alcohol is 14.6. It's high, but I can't tell. I can't smell it. It's not sharp on my nose, and it's really nice on the palate. It's extremely
very
well balanced.
Yep. Yeah, it's well balanced. Because I was nervous when I saw the alcohol. I was like, oh no. What do we got here? What is happening? California. It doesn't have that hot feeling in my mouth. It extra heavy. Yeah. I'm still gonna drink it tomorrow with a hamburger, but like a fresh, real burger.
Well, we taste things in a sort of matrix, right? So if one thing jumps out, it's probably just not in balance, right? If this wine didn't have as much tannin or fruit to it, then the alcohol really would show.
Yeah.
Right. Where can folks find this wine outside of California? Can it be found here on the East Coast, and what distributor?
So we are in 43 different states around this country. MS Walker carries us, for example, in the Boston area. In New York, it's what's it called? The Ox. No, it'll come to me because they merged. I can never keep track of it. But we've had really good representation in the East Coast, and all those are on our website. The various distributors for each winery for each state. But yes, we're widely distributed. We're not in a lot of big box kind of total wines and so forth. We are in a few, mainly sort of restaurants and smaller wine retailers. But these days also we ship a lot of wine direct as well around the country.
Okay, excellent,
awesome. So just a few more questions, and these will be just like random and fun, and you just give us whatever answer that comes to your mind. And the first one is for everybody. Name something you wish people did more of.
So mind their business wouldn't be a good thing to say.
I mean,
I was thinking I wish people.
Okay, Peter, I just had to give you a feel of how silly we can be sometimes.
Sure. How about take deep breaths?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Things will work out. We'll just have to take deep breaths and being generous. I think one of the things I think all of us, I mean, generosity is something we all value, but I think during this last period, especially, just the generosity of friends and people you don't even know, and just, our people who have supported our winery and bought our wines, and hopefully our work and it has its own generosity, bringing a bottle of wine to the table after during a harder period of time. One of the great quotes I heard, or this last couple of months, was that science will get us out of this mess, but wine will get us through.
For sure.
Big facts.
I agree.
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah.
I agree.
I love that. My answer is just shut up sometimes. Everybody does not need to know your first burning opinion about something.
Exactly.
Sometimes if you don't have anything nice to say, just be quiet.
They don't need to know your second opinion either. Like sometimes just like, no, just no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a great quote the other day like that. It said, if you can't be positive, then please be quiet.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
People don't do that enough.
Nope.
So, yeah.
Right.
No. Leslie, anything before we move on?
Thank you.
Oh,
Say thank you enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
People forgot those words.
Yeah.
Practice patience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we could name others.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of things I wish people did more.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're limited us to one.
We're
We
just
can keep
getting
going.
started.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, our next question. If you received $10,000, what would you do with it?
Oh, we up to 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
We're up to 10.
Listen, we taking that trip to Tokai. That's what we doing, right?
Well,
Right.
There's the
Yes,
answer.
we
there
got
we
10.
go.
We got
That's
10
it.
stacks. We going to Tokai.
That's 10
Okay.
G's.
Exactly.
Mhm. Peter, what about you?
I have to say I would give it to my local food bank.
Oh,
And the reason I say that is because I just can't imagine what it's like to be hungry, to really face food insecurity. I don't want to get too deep on that one, but
sure.
it's what we do. Like, it's the idea of gathering around with even if you don't have a family, if it's just a couple friends, just somebody you met around a table is just the core of what we're about. And so for me, that's really hit home. I've become aware of how many people really are not that far off from being hungry in our country, which I just can't. That's just not right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great answer.
Right. Well, then go on to the next question.
Yeah.
I'm still going to
Right.
I'm still going to Tokai with mine. I mean, that's fine, Peter. You can do what you want.
Right.
Okay.
I'm like, is that enough for the schooner ride? I'm still doing that.
Okay. What item do you need when you go on a hike?
I have no idea what an answer to this could be.
Just one item?
Do you have like that one thing that you need when you go on a hike?
Like another
I can't forget
I'm going
this.
on a hike. Another pair of feet for me to go on a hike. Like
you can tell who isn't outdoorsy, right?
I have been outside, but I'm not outdoorsy. I've been outdoors.
Well, if you're going to go on a hike, prayerfully some type of device that you'll have that you could communicate back to somebody that's not on the hike in case something happens.
That's what we can use some of that 10,000 for.
I'm just saying, because
your satellite phone.
I need a reinforcement.
phone.
I need that big brick phone to be like, hello,
Something. Walkie-talkie, something.
Y'all don't have me out there like the Blair Witch Project. No, thank you.
And that has happened to me in Alaska. So you won't catch me ever again.
And it's a little light flex. That happened to me in Alaska. I'm like, I couldn't find my way home on the south side of Chicago. Okay. He said Alaska.
I'm telling you, that's another whole story in itself. But
sure. All right, Peter, what's your answer?
Person. What? Yes.
Yes, please tell us.
I'm halfway stuck between a good friend or a beer.
Wow.
Oh.
And here I thought you was gonna say something like, oh, my favorite granola.
Our joke is it takes a lot of beer to make good wine. So I think when you get to the top of that mountain, it's always good to have a refresher. So I'm gonna go with a can of beer.
That's true.
I like it. Huh.
That is true.
Leslie, do you have one?
Oh, like a good walking stick in the canteen.
Yeah. Me, it's shoes. A good hiking shoe. I don't know what that is because I haven't gone to hike in eons, but I feel like my feet would be the most important to worry about.
Someone told me socks.
The right socks, yeah.
I can see that too.
Yeah.
And that you should do 2 pair, especially during the summer, because you start to sweat and your feet get wet.
Ooh.
So then you can change your socks.
Okay.
So your feet are comfortable. That was a tip that was given to me. Haven't had to put it to use yet.
I will never have to put that to use. Okay. No one has given me that tip because they know it would be useless in my life.
I was a trained Girl Scout, so I used to hike a lot.
No, I've eaten Girl Scout cookies.
Oh my gosh. All right, last question. What is your favorite shellfish?
Oh, easy. Oysters.
Oysters.
Yeah, this one was hard. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, but I'll go with oysters.
Do you have a favorite type of oysters? Because oysters on the West Coast are so different from East Coast oysters. I think yours are tend to be sweeter.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite one, honestly. I mean, I just think they're all good. There's actually just Hog Island, we do a lot of work with Hog Island oysters out here in California. They're just putting out, they've kind of they haven't rediscovered, but just re-commercialized these really, really small oysters, these Olympias that are supposedly were native all up and down the coast. So they're super briny and very coppery. They're small. Those are quite good. So
well, if
we're doing
if you ever come to the East Coast, we'll take you to Maryland. There's a big a project that's been going on for the past 5 years about the oyster beds in Maryland. And so now the oysters have repopulated here. It's a huge project on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah, I've been following that. They're doing something similar here. I work with the group called San Francisco Baykeeper, and there's been work because they're great filter feeders and they clear out a lot of the water as well. I love the soft shell crab though. In Maryland, when I was in college, I used to go down there occasionally, and the old butcher paper and that Old Bay seasoning, and that's a meal. Corn and the potatoes.
Yeah, I think Sarita's going to be crabs.
It's definitely crabs, but clams is a close second. Love clams.
Shrimp.
Yeah. Shrimp for you?
Yep, shrimp and lobster. They're close first and second. I have to go. I have a 7:00 call. Peter, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
I look forward to toasting some wine in Tokai on the Danube River.
On the Danube.
Exactly. Bye, ladies. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Well, Peter, we were actually wrapping up. Please tell everybody where they can follow Obsidian and you, perhaps, if you're on social media.
Yeah, so Obsidian Wine Co. is our handle, I believe. And we have our website up with all the details about where we are and what we're doing. That's our most detailed. I don't have a lot of personal social media, I got to say, but we do it through the winery.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your day, especially outside in the mountains, in the snow.
In the snow.
We
appreciate you.
That's awesome.
That, and also, nice cheers to you.
And cheers to this beautiful Cabernet.
Cheers. I'm finishing.
Thanks.
All right.
And thanks for having us on.
Of course. Anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. Good. And come visit. We'll do one of those adventures together.
Oh, absolutely.
That's good.
Thanks for joining us, Swell Suite, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can also find this episode on YouTube. Peter's backdrop was so spectacular. I decided to put it on YouTube so you all could see it for yourselves. check it out. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter @SwirlSuite. Cheers.